So, do you think Sasquatches have a language and communicate with each other, or more like a language?
Uh-huh. Well, the first indigenous people in North America to talk about Sasquatch were the Chehalis Indians up in British Columbia. They told stories to a man named Burns, J.W. Burns. He wrote some articles for a magazine in Canada back in the late 1920s, telling tales that he had been told from the Chehalis Indians, and they claimed that the Sasquatch up there that they were familiar with spoke in the Douglas dialect. Now, if you do any research on Indian dialects, you'll find that the Indians are actually categorized by their language groups. And I won't pretend to be an expert on this and not attempt to expound on it, but suffice it to say, there are different dialects in different parts of the country that seem to be interconnected, and then there'll be other variations on these. And not all Indians were joined together as a great nation. The Comanche, the Sioux, they would get together and have big powwows where they could join together and fight the Europeans in force as a huge Indian nation. But here in California, we had Indians that were just scattered little bands that didn't really intercommunicate. And they had no large nation of any kind, no central government, so to speak, where they could actually join forces and fight off the Europeans. So the Indian wars here in California were a lot different. But there are people on the present day who have made claims of speaking to the Sasquatch. There's a very famous or infamous, depending on how you look at it, story out of Tennessee about a woman who claims her grandfather spoke 5 native dialects and was able to communicate with some Bigfoot. These Bigfoot had reclaimed their toddler son, who had been injured by the man when he felled a tree that landed on the baby Bigfoot and hurt it. He took good care of it, though, and the Bigfoot weren't angry, and they started communicating using these native terms that they had in common, as the story goes. And this woman, Janice Coy, claims this went on for some 50 years, and she actually grew up alongside a family of Bigfoot. Now, most people in the Bigfoot community think that story is absolutely bogus and a total fantasy by this woman who, has some sort of a fantasy-prone character or something and has made this all up. I won't go so far as to say that. I open my mind up to any of a number of possibilities with these things, because some fellas, Ron Moorhead, I think is the man that comes to mind, he with Al Berry and I think another man recorded some sounds in the Sierras over 20 years ago that they actually marketed on CDs and on tapes of these Bigfoot sounds where they were screaming and they could hear them in the night. They had a hunting blind up in the Sierras, and these things would surround the blind in the middle of the night, and they could hear them communicating. They would yell out to them, they would yell back, and they would say things and try to imitate them, and there was this whole interchange going on, and they managed to record a whole bunch of these sounds, including some sounds which are typically referred to in the Bigfoot vernacular in the community as samurai sounds, because they sound kind of like John Belushi imitating samurais on Saturday Night Live. This very guttural speech pattern, and I've listened to these things over and over again, and I'll tell you what, I've had people come into the museum here who have been awakened in the middle of the night by scary sounds. They said, one man came in and said, something was passing through my backyard, and it was making the scariest sounds I've ever heard in my life. He said, all I could do was just pull the covers over and just hope that it didn't stop. And so I played him some of these sounds from the Sierra Sounds tapes of the samurai chatter, and this man said the hair immediately went right up on the back of his neck, and goosebumps rose up, and he said that was identical to the sounds that he heard in his backyard right here in Felton about 18 years ago. So I'm not going to discount the idea that these things may be able to communicate with human beings using certain dialects. In different parts of the country, that would probably change. I think that would be a logical assumption. So I'm open to this possibility.